suck it up and suffer the consequences later is what autistic masking feels like to me. So I was diagnosed as autistic last year at the age of 49, and needless to say, I've been going through a bit of an identity crisis ever since then, and I've really come to realise how much I've relied on masking throughout all of my life. It's so difficult, isn't it, in terms of trying to unmask? But I think we have to firstly realise all of the ways that we've been masking before we can have any real attempts at unmasking. So I think my masking definitely started in childhood, and I had quite a difficult relationship with my parents, and in particular my dad's. And it's only now actually that I realised that they were both probably autistic, and I may well do a video on that separately at some points. But my dad could not stand seeing or hearing any emotion from me whatsoever. And I do have siblings, but they're older than me, so in very many ways it felt like I was an only child. And yeah, I just get shouted at for being emotional. So any time that I'd have, I don't know, maybe some excitement in my voice, or if I whined over something that wasn't going my way, yeah, I'd get shouted at. So I developed a fear of my dad, and I think this was definitely the first stepping stone in me creating my autistic mask. Obviously, I didn't know I was autistic as a young girl, but I certainly developed strategies in order to people please. And similarly, at school, I had a really difficult time. I was bullied and just didn't fit in with other children. So many autistic girls will develop an autistic mask as a result. So you're really copying behaviour that you see, and you try and mimic it so that you'll hopefully gradually be accepted into the folds. But that's quite rare, isn't it? You're never actually accepted into the folds, but you'll do whatever you can to camouflage yourself and your weird traits. And I remember one thing in particular actually about not being able to show emotion, and it was my mum's funeral, and I was 12, and I remember the day just being absolutely really stressful. It felt kind of unreal. I just felt that because of my learned behaviour and in hiding my emotion, I just wasn't able to cry on the day. Although I desperately wanted to, I just felt that because I was just so used to sucking it up and hiding any emotion, I just, yeah, couldn't be emotional on the day. And this has been repeated in so many aspects of my life. I've just not been able to show emotion. And I think this is all kind of exacerbated by the fact that I also have alexithymia, so I do struggle with recognizing emotions. So this all gave me a good grounding for adulthood in learning how to hide my true self away, really. And it's just so sad, isn't it, to think of autistic masking in that way, because that's how it is. You're hiding your true and your authentic self because your true self just isn't good enough. So because I was so used to hiding myself away and sucking it up, that when I started out in the workplace, this was also an issue actually. And I remember one of my first jobs was working with another load of girls, really, and they were a few years older than me. I was definitely the youngest there, though, but because I was just so used to not showing any kind of emotional reactions, and because I was so used to being a people pleaser, that I was subjected to quite a lot of teasing in that job, actually, because I was so geeky compared to the other girls. I just had none of the life experience that they had as well. And through this teasing, I never really showed that it upset me in any way, because I just didn't know how to show emotion or how to show discomfort in that way, other than blushing, actually, because I was a real blusher when I was young. I'd get embarrassed about anything, really. But in terms of showing like emotion or anger or frustration, I just didn't have the functionality in many ways. I just was so used to hiding all of this away. So I don't know if because of that I was subjected to more teasing, because they felt that I wasn't bothered by it, that they allowed themselves to kind of do it a bit more, really. But I definitely felt uncomfortable and targeted by their teasing, but I just didn't know how to deal with it other than just sucking it up. And this carried on through my work years, and whatever job I'd have, I just didn't know how to show emotion again, because I just put on my mask and just wanted to appear to the world as normally as I could, really. And although I'd see other people get emotional at work now and again, I just didn't know how to do it myself. It was like my brain and my body had a real block on this. And although I'd put on a curated face for work, whenever I got home, I'd very often just not be able to move. I'd go into shutdown quite regularly. Very often on a Friday, I'd just crash, get into bed, and not get out of bed until Monday morning, really, other than for food and the loo and stuff. I just found it really hard to cope, and I just did not know how other people were doing it, because I just felt exhausted by all of it, and I didn't really know why. I just didn't know why I was so different. And as well as mental health issues, I've had various physical symptoms throughout the years in terms of hiding myself away internally. And I've had IBS for my whole life, really. I've had really bad anxious stomachs on many a morning before I have to go to work or go out for kind of some social thing, because I know how stressful it's going to be, or I knew how stressful the day ahead was going to be. And it just feels like a prison in many ways, in terms of being stuck and trapped in your body, because you're not the version of yourself that you're showing to the world. And it's just so difficult to put into words how it feels. And I've tried therapy a few times, and it's never worked out for me. And I'm in no way suggesting that therapy isn't right for autistic people, because we know that therapy really works for some autistic people. It's just a case of finding the right therapist and knowing that they have a knowledge of autism, and that can be really beneficial for so many autistic people. But I've just had a dreadful time with therapy. I don't know how many I've seen, actually, maybe 3 or 4 in my life, but they've just not been good for me at all. One in particular, I was assigned to go and see a therapist by my GP. Therapy is really hard to come by in the UK in terms of through our NHS or our National Health Service. But I was assigned maybe 6 sessions, I think. But the therapist I saw was the poshest woman that you could ever imagine, really. And I absolutely could not connect with her in any way, shape, or form, because I came from a background full of trauma. And it's not to say that this lady hadn't experienced trauma herself, but there was just such a gulf between us in terms of class and just being completely different human beings, that I just would lie during sessions with her and just make out that everything was fine when it wasn't fine. And I just found it really unhelpful, actually, and in many ways quite traumatic in itself, because I knew I wasn't being myself and I didn't know how to be myself. And if you've got the wrong therapist, that's always going to be the case, really, or certainly for me anyway. And in terms of friendships, this has been really difficult for me as well. And in fact, I've just done a video on friendships that I'll link below. But I don't know, I just always felt like, in a way, I'd get found out by friends if I was friends with them for too long, really. Like, I still really couldn't be my true self, certainly with most friends I've had. I think maybe there was one or two in my life that I felt more comfortable with, but certainly in the main, I've just felt that because I've presented a curated version of myself to new friends, that this would be impossible to maintain on a regular basis if you're seeing somebody quite a lot and you're socializing with them and sharing really personal information with them. If you feel like you're hiding your true self away, that's of course going to cause difficulties, isn't it? So yeah, I just rely on being a people pleaser for many of my friendships. And I've spoken a few times now about how I've had to rely on alcohol hugely for socializing, and of course this presents a much more heightened version of yourself to people. You know, I tend to be a bit more gregarious, not vastly more gregarious, but certainly more gregarious than I usually am with people, more fun loving, more responsive to kind of humour. And when all of that is kind of stripped away, you're left with quite a different person entirely, really. So for me, I found it really difficult to know how to be both drunk Lizzie and normal Lizzie, but still entertaining Lizzie, to yeah, to new friends in particular. It's been quite the difficult balance, really. And when we think of what autistic masks are, they're really like an amalgam of all the interesting people that you've met in your life, aren't they? When you really boil it down, because we copy and mimic behaviours from others, but only really people that we're going to find kind of interesting in some way. And I remember actually in my mid-teens, I used to go to a family's house quite a lot, and they were kind of connected to my dad. Basically, it was a bloke that my dad knew from the pub, and um, I think his family kind of felt a bit sorry for me because I didn't have a mum, and I'd go to their family home quite a lot, and they were really lovely with me, actually. And I'm still so grateful for those relationships that I had. Well, they were fairly short lived as well. But there's also, who I'll call Maria, was a good few years older than me, and she would socialise with a bunch of other people every Sunday, and they'd go to the pub, and she'd take me along with her some Sundays, and it was really nice. They were all actually really quite nice people from memory, but they'd all get really quite drunk on a Sunday afternoon, and they may well end up at somebody's house for a kind of mini party later in the afternoon. And I would attend these social gatherings, and I was almost mute for all of them because I just didn't know how to be, because our mid-teens are our most formative years. And certainly if you're an autistic girl who's really unsure about the world and really unsure of other people, and although I'd be almost mute, I would be observing everybody at that party, and really zoning in on their behaviours because they all seemed to be having lots of fun and they all could relate to each other so well. And I was really envious in many ways because I just wondered why I just didn't have this available to me with my own friends at school. And yeah, I learned so much from this group of people, and I don't think they'd even remember who I was now, but I'm really thankful to them for a number of reasons, actually. But yeah, just giving me this opportunity to observe human behaviour every Sunday was really useful as a masked autistic person. And in addition to this opportunity to be David Attenborough every Sunday to observe human behaviour, I also learnt a lot from pop culture, really, TV and film, and I imagine many other high masking autistic people have learned how to deal with different situations in this way too. And I just really zone in on different kind of scenarios and really observe how characters would deal with situations. And I remember one example of this was when my dad died in my late 20s. I remember having a conversation with somebody at work, I think it was, and I didn't know how to talk authentically about this because I'm so used to hiding emotion and my true feelings and my true self that I think I was talking or responding, and in a way where I was giving a conversation that I'd heard on a TV show almost verbatim, actually. And I remember at the time thinking, why am I basically repeating this thing that I heard on this TV show with somebody in the same position that I'm now in? And it was so strange to have this awareness and realization in the moment that I was repeating words that I'd heard from a TV show. And I often thought about this moment for years after, actually, wondering why on earth I'd done it. Why did I just repeat these words that I'd heard? Verbatim, probably, I don't know. I can't actually remember what the show was. I think it may have been a soap. But I didn't know why I was doing it, and I found it so confusing. And I think at the time, I maybe put it down to not having a mum and not being taught these things, but it still didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, really, because this kind of stuff should be innate, but for whatever reason, it just was not in me, and it left me completely baffled. So I think that since I've entered my 40s, and probably with the help of perimenopause and having a chronic illness, I think I am subconsciously unmasking. And this is really interesting, a process, because I've been a people pleaser all of my life. I just never imagined there would come a time when I would give way to more authentic responses to things, really. And I remember I had a job in my early 40s, just for a short while, but I was talking to this woman at work, and she said that she'd bought a drone as a present for somebody, and my immediate reaction before I could even think was, I hate drones. And I couldn't believe I said it. And I don't actually hate drones, it's just at the time we were having a lot of issues where I live with drones overhead for some reason, and a lot of people in the local neighbourhoods were, quite rightly, really annoyed by it. So it was something I was really mindful about at the time, and it's only now that actually that I can appreciate how brilliant drones are, really. We can see just beautiful overhead shots. And there's one guy actually who has a channel on YouTube, and he has a TV show here in the UK, and he lives on a narrowboat on the canals, and his name is Robbie Cumming, and I'll leave his channel linked below, but it's just really lovely to see how he lives, and he includes kind of drone footage as well, and it's also interesting. But anyway, that's a slight aside. So my response was just to be horrified by this woman's drone that she bought as a gift for a loved one. And I remember her looking really shocked at me, and I was shocked that I'd said it as well. But it's only now that I can look back. And although I didn't even know or really know that I was autistic at this point, I just had a sneaky suspicion I might be. Yeah, this along with a few other examples, it's just got to a point where my brain's been a bit like, you know what, I really can't do this anymore, or I can't do it in the same kind of way. And yeah, it's just fascinating, really, that it wasn't ever a conscious decision. So certainly in my early 40s to unmask, it's just kind of happened slowly along the way, and I'd like that to continue actually. Yeah, I'm keen to remove it as much as I can because I do want to be way more of my authentic self, because I think I deserve it, really, certainly after 50 years. And I think also it's been really helpful for me to have a partner that I'm basically completely unmasked around, because it then kind of sets a precedent, doesn't it? You know, if you can be unmasked around one person, then it gives you hope that you might well be able to do that around other people as well. And although it's early days for me, I'm really keen to, yeah, just shift this mask and stop sucking it up, because it's just not good for us. It's not good for our mental health. It's not good for our physical health to constantly have to deal with the consequences later in people pleasing or just giving a false version of ourselves to the world. It's really quite destructive in so many ways, and I'm just keen to find ways to unmask as I move forward, really. So I'd love to know if you can relate to any of the points that I've raised in today's video. If I'm honest, it's such a massive topic, isn't it, that I could talk about it for much longer. So it's no doubt an area that I'll come back to at some point. I'd also love to hear any tips that you have for unmasking, and yeah, if you've been able to succeed, or if you've just not found a way to unmask either, I'd be really keen to hear below. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching. Give it a like if you got this far, and I'll see you again soon.